In one of our previous episodes, we talked about some of the most interesting breakthroughs in designing armored vehicles. Today, we're going to speak about the most notable modern advancements that shaped the aviation industry. The first supersonic aircraft, the first planes with radar, and other things that defined aviation as we know it today. The battlefields of World War II were the proving ground for a lot of new technologies, both on the ground and in the air. For example, it was during the war when the world saw the advent of mass-produced jet aircraft, and the first of these was the majestic Me-262 Schwalbe, or the Swallow, that was accepted into service in April 1944. German engineers started to work on this design in the 1930s, long before the idea of jet-propelled aircraft became widely accepted. Even though all the major players had similar projects in the works, Germany was the first nation to get their Schwalbe, and the Arado R-234 Blitz jet bomber to actual production lines. They were also the first to get a proper production jet engine, the Jumo 004B. It's important to mention, though, that the idea of such an engine didn't originate in Germany. In fact, it was the British engineer called Frank Whittle who actually invented the jet engine. As early as 1929, he came up with the idea of the compressor-turbine combination. Obviously, it wasn't just the jet engine that Germans were interested in. In 1944, the Luftwaffe started using the Me-163 Comet, the first and the only tailless rocket-powered production fighter aircraft. It represented the culmination of Alexander Lippisch's years of research in rocket planes. Thanks to its rocket engine, the Comet could reach the speed of up to 1,000 kph, and it was designed in a way to ensure that it also handled pretty well, all things considered. Another important invention tested during World War II was the airborne radar. This technology was first employed by the British on their Bristol Blenheim bombers. During the Battle of Britain, aircraft fitted with radar equipment served as night fighters and proved to be highly effective at combating that German threat. Soon, other nations had similar systems as well. Germany tested their Heinkel 219 Uhu, and the US started to use the radar-equipped Black Widow night fighter. The British were also the first ones to make the first aircraft with vertical takeoff and landing capabilities. We're talking about the Hawker Siddeley Harrier, created during the Cold War era. In the middle of the 1950s, the military were becoming increasingly more interested in vectored thrust engines, as they allowed engineers to make aircraft that didn't need conventional runways. Design work on the new British plane started in 1957. The development process took more than a decade, with the Harrier finally accepted into service in 1969. By the way, quite a few legendary aircraft designers worked on this one, including Sir Sidney Cam, the father of the Hurricane, and Stanley Hooker of the Bristol Engine Company. He worked on Rolls-Royce jet engines with Frank Whittle during World War II. During the late 1950s, the USAF were the first to outfit their aircraft with air-to-air guided missiles. Yeah, there were a few German experiments involving such missiles much earlier during World War II, but the first operational production missiles of this type were made in the US, and American pilots received their first Falcons and Sidewinders in 1956, a very important upgrade that allowed the Sabres to fight more advanced aircraft like the MiG-17. The military was so impressed with missiles that the next generation of fighter aircraft was almost made with no conventional cannons at all. Sabres were also the first production aircraft to break the sound barrier. There is a small caveat, though, as it wasn't any regular Sabre that did it. but the F-100 Super Sabre variant that was very different from its predecessors. It had more wing sweep, a Meteor engine, and were some changes made to the fuselage. In 1954, when Americans started flying those, they were the fastest fighter aircraft available at that time. We also simply have to mention German efforts to develop a new type of guided weapon that resulted in the creation of the Fritz X. Special bombs that Max Kramer, a gifted German engineer, was working on since 1938. The Fritz X didn't have an engine. It was a free-falling bomb with radio-controlled spoilers. It wasn't the only guided bomb created during World War II, but it was the first that successfully sank a ship, the Italian battleship Roma. Strictly speaking, the Me-262 wasn't the very first aircraft with a turbojet engine, and the Super Sabre wasn't the very first plane to break the sound barrier. But they were definitely the first designs that achieved that, and were also produced en masse, and that's what counts at the end of the day. Did we miss anything? What is your favorite innovation in this field? Come on, you lot. Tell us in the comments below. Don't be shy. We're hungry for info. Bye.